If you find an unopened present under your tree after Christmas, call the police. It might just save your life. The present wasn't there when I locked up on December 26th. I'm certain because I'm the kind of person who checks door locks twice, who counts plates before running the dishwasher, who maintains spreadsheets for household inventory. My wife Linda calls it excessive, but it saved us from 3 overdue bills and 1 near disaster with expired car registration in the past year alone. So when I came downstairs at 5:47 a.m. on December 27th to prepare my morning coffee before my 7 a.m. video conference with Tokyo, I noticed immediately. The box sat perfectly centered under our artificial tree, positioned with geometric precision that made my skin crawl. Forest green wrapping paper caught the pre-dawn light filtering through our kitchen window. Silver ribbon tied in a bow so flawless it looked mechanically produced. No card, no tag, no indication who left it, or when, or why. I stood there in my pajama bottoms and old college sweatshirt, coffee grounds forgotten in my hand, staring at this impossible object that violated everything I knew about our secure home. Our alarm system had been active since 10:17 p.m. the previous night. I checked the app on my phone to confirm. No breach notifications, no alerts of any kind, just continuous green check marks indicating doors and windows remained sealed. The doorbell camera showed nothing unusual either. Just our empty porch and the street beyond, where occasional cars passed through the darkness. Yet somehow, between my last walkthrough at 10 p.m. and this moment, someone had placed a present under our tree, not thrown it, not dropped it carelessly, positioned it with deliberate care. Linda appeared on the stairs behind me, her bathrobe trailing, asking what I was doing standing in the dark like a statue. I pointed at the present without turning around, because movement felt wrong somehow. Like acknowledging it too directly might make whatever was happening worse. She walked over and picked it up immediately, shaking it next to her ear the way she'd done with wrapped gifts since childhood, trying to guess contents by sound and weight. It shifted inside, she said. Maybe books or a set of dishes, definitely heavier than clothing. She started picking at the tape, and I grabbed her wrist harder than I intended, my fingers leaving temporary red marks on her skin. My reaction surprised both of us. Linda looked at me with this expression that said she was reconsidering our entire marriage, questioning whether I'd finally snapped from work stress and too many early mornings. But I couldn't explain why touching that present felt fundamentally wrong in ways that bypassed logic and went straight to some primal part of my brain that recognized danger. She set it back down, slower this time, and asked what I thought we should do. I suggested waiting until we figured out where it came from, who sent it. Anything to delay the moment when we'd have to open it and discover what waited inside. She agreed, but I could see in her face that she thought I was overreacting to something innocent. Our 3 kids came downstairs at 6:30 a.m., Bethany first at 14, moving with that teenage combination of grace and irritation that defined her lately, followed by the twins Oscar and Delilah, 9 years old and loud enough to wake neighbors 3 houses over. Delilah spotted the present immediately because she had this uncanny ability to detect anything that might be hers from across a room. She asked whose present got forgotten, and I said we weren't sure yet, that someone probably dropped it off late, and we'd figure it out. Oscar argued that finders keepers should apply to unclaimed presents, a philosophy I'd spent years trying to correct. I told him no with enough firmness that all 3 kids went quiet, recognizing the tone I used when something was serious. Bethany gave me that look she'd perfected recently, the one that communicated I was being weird again, and she'd be discussing it later with her friends. But she didn't argue, just poured cereal and scrolled through her phone while the twins debated which video games they'd play that afternoon. Linda started her morning routine of calling relatives, working through our extensive family network to identify who might have left a late gift. I could hear her on the phone with her mother, explaining the situation in that voice she used when dealing with potentially awkward family dynamics. Her mother said no, hadn't left anything, sounded confused why Linda was even asking. I left for work at 8:30 a.m., with the present still sitting there, positioned in that perfect center that continued bothering me hours later. During my morning meeting about quarterly projections, I kept losing focus, imagining that box growing somehow or moving slightly when no one watched. My colleague asked 3 times if I'd reviewed the Southeast Asian market analysis before I realized he was talking to me. I apologized and blamed poor sleep, which wasn't entirely untrue. That night I'd dreamed about finding something in our house, though the details faded before I could grasp them fully. Linda called at lunch to update me. She'd contacted everyone in our extended family. Her sister in Portland, my brother in Chicago, her cousin who lived locally, even distant relatives we only saw at funerals. All of them said the same thing. They hadn't left any present. She'd expanded to neighbors asking if anyone had seen someone approach our house between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Nothing. She'd checked with parents from the kids' school, friends from church, even our mailman who sometimes left packages inside our screen door when it rained. Every inquiry led nowhere. The present had no origin story, no explanation, just appeared like it had materialized from nothing. More disturbing was the doorbell camera footage. Linda had reviewed every minute from 8 p.m., December 26th through 6 a.m., December 27th. Nothing approached our door, no delivery vehicles stopped, no people walked up our sidewalk. The camera had clear night vision and motion detection that would trigger recording if anything moved within its field of view. But the recordings showed only an empty porch and occasional cars passing on the street. Either our security system had failed completely without logging any errors, or that present had appeared through methods that made no technological sense. I came home at 6:15 p.m. to find Linda had moved the present to our dining room table, removing it from the kids' line of sight. She'd been staring at it all day, she admitted, and it was starting to unsettle her in ways she couldn't articulate. The green wrapping looked darker in evening light, less festive and more ominous, like the color had changed subtly throughout the day. I suggested throwing it away, just taking it to the outside trash, and forgetting this whole situation. Linda said that felt wasteful, and what if it actually was for us, and we were being paranoid over nothing? She'd convinced herself it must be from her cousin Daniel, who was notoriously disorganized, and might have dropped it off drunk after a Christmas party without remembering later. I knew Daniel. Daniel once forgot his own wedding anniversary 3 years running until his wife threatened divorce. But I didn't argue because Linda needed a logical explanation, something that made sense of this violation of our secure home. Instead, I carried the present to our garage, up onto a high shelf where the kids couldn't reach, and told everyone we'd deal with it later. The moment I touched it, I felt that wrongness again. Not just a feeling, but almost a physical sensation of something pressing back against my palms through the wrapping paper. I set it down quickly and wiped my hands on my jeans even though they weren't dirty. That night I dreamed about our house burning, not the quick Hollywood explosions, but slow consumption. Flames eating through walls while my family slept upstairs and I stood paralyzed in the living room watching. The green present sat untouched in the center of the fire, wrapping paper pristine while everything around it turned to ash. I woke at 3:42 a.m. drenched in sweat, Linda sleeping peacefully beside me, and knew I wouldn't sleep again that night. I went downstairs and made coffee at 4 a.m., sitting at the kitchen table in darkness, because turning on lights felt like advertising my presence to something watching. December 28th started normally enough. Shower, dress, breakfast with the kids. Oscar spilled orange juice across the table, and Delilah blamed him, even though she'd knocked his elbow. Bethany ignored both of them, earbuds in, existing in that teenage bubble where family drama couldn't penetrate. Linda kissed me goodbye at the door and reminded me we needed to schedule dentist appointments for everyone, including me, because I'd been avoiding my cleaning for 6 months. I promised I'd call today, knowing I wouldn't, knowing she knew I wouldn't, participating in this familiar dance of good intentions and eventual guilt. I made it to my car before the feeling hit, that sense of being watched from our garage window. I turned and looked directly at the small window near the roof, where we stored things we'd need someday, but never actually used. The present sat on its shelf, invisible from this angle, but I could feel it there, like a weight pressing against my awareness. I stood in our driveway for a full minute, hand on my car door, before Linda knocked on the window inside and mouthed, "Are you okay?" I waved and got in the car, but the feeling followed me to work, sitting in my passenger seat like an invisible companion. My productivity that day reached new lows. I spent 40 minutes reading the same email about supply chain logistics without comprehending a single word. My assistant poked her head in twice to ask if I needed anything, her concern visible in the way she lingered in the doorway. During lunch, I sat in my car scrolling through my phone, not looking at anything specific, just avoiding going back inside where I'd have to pretend to be functional. Around 2 p.m., Linda texted me a photo, the present, still on the garage shelf, but the lighting looked different somehow. The shadows didn't fall quite right for afternoon sun. I asked what made her take the photo, and she said she didn't know. She just felt compelled to check on it. I called Linda at 3 p.m. and suggested we just open it, end this uncertainty one way or another. Hear her pause before agreeing, that little hesitation that said she'd been thinking the same thing but needed me to suggest it first. We decided to do it that evening after the kids went to bed, turn it into an event we controlled rather than this looming anxiety. I felt better immediately, having a plan, a timeline, a moment when this situation would resolve. The rest of my workday passed in a blur of almost productivity, good enough to maintain appearances, but nowhere near my usual standards. I drove home at 5:30 p.m., getting caught in traffic that made the normal 20-minute drive stretch to 45 minutes. Construction had closed 2 lanes on the highway, and I sat watching brake lights ahead of me while my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic texts from Linda. Call me. Serious. Call now. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail, which never happened because she kept her phone charged obsessively. I tried the house phone and got our answering machine, my own voice from 5 years ago telling callers to leave a message. The traffic finally moved, and I drove home 15 miles over the speed limit, running one yellow light that had already turned red. Linda stood in our driveway when I pulled up, her face pale in the early evening darkness. The garage door stood wide open, every light in, the house blazing like we were hosting a party. She grabbed my arm before I'd fully exited the car and pulled me toward the garage without explaining. I tried asking what happened, but she just shook her head and pointed. The present sat on our workbench instead of the high shelf. Not fallen. There were no other disturbed items, no signs it had tumbled down. Simply relocated, positioned exactly center on the bench surface, like someone had placed it there with measuring tools. But it had changed. The green wrapping paper had darkened to deep red, the color of blood that started to oxidize. The silver ribbon had turned black, or maybe it was always black and my memory had filled in details incorrectly. Liquid pooled beneath it, thick and dark, dripping onto the concrete floor with a steady drip, drip, drip that echoed in the silent garage. Linda said she'd come out to start laundry at 3:15 p.m. and found it like this. She'd been too scared to touch it, too scared to go back inside alone, had stood in the driveway for 2 hours waiting for me to come home. I approached slowly, each step feeling like wading through water, resistance building with proximity. The red wasn't wrapping paper anymore, I could see that now. The original green paper had been soaked through from inside, saturated with whatever liquid was leaking out. The bow remained pristine black, somehow untouched by the spreading stain. I grabbed a screwdriver from the workbench and used it to lift one corner of the wrapping paper. Underneath wasn't cardboard or any normal packaging material. The surface looked organic, grayish-green, and slightly translucent, with visible veins running through it like a living thing's circulatory system. Linda made a sound behind me, not quite a scream, but close. I dropped the screwdriver and backed away, both of us staring at this thing that couldn't exist in our garage, in our normal suburban home where the biggest previous crisis had been a water heater leak 3 years ago. The liquid pooling on the floor didn't look like blood exactly. Too dark, too viscous, with an oily sheen that reflected our garage lights in rainbow patterns. It was spreading slowly toward the drain in our floor, following the subtle slope that had been built into the concrete for exactly this purpose. I said we needed to call the police, now, immediately. Linda nodded, but neither of us moved, both transfixed by this impossible situation. Then the present moved. Not dramatically, not shaking or jumping, just a subtle shift, like something inside had changed position. We both ran for the garage door at the same time, stumbling into each other in our panic, hitting the button to close the door as we burst into the house. The door rolled down with mechanical slowness that felt like torture, taking 15 seconds that lasted forever. We watched through the small window as it descended, cutting off our view of the workbench, the present, that spreading pool of not quite blood. The kids were upstairs, completely oblivious to the crisis unfolding below them. I could hear Oscar and Delilah arguing about whose turn it was on the Xbox, their voices carrying down through the heating vents with perfect normalcy. Bethany's music thumped faintly through her closed bedroom door, that heavy bass that annoyed Linda, but I secretly didn't mind. Everything upstairs was normal, only we knew that something fundamentally wrong had infected our home. I dialed 911 with shaking hands, each button press requiring concentration because my fingers wouldn't stop trembling. The operator answered on the second ring, her voice professional and calm, asking what my emergency was. I started explaining and immediately heard how insane it sounded. A present appeared in our house. Now it's changed color and leaking something. It's not normal. She asked if anyone was injured or in immediate danger, and I had to admit no, not yet, but something was very wrong. She asked if I'd been drinking or using any controlled substances. Standard question, I knew, but it stung. I said no, completely sober, and there was something in my garage that shouldn't exist. The silence lasted 5 seconds before she responded. She said she'd send an officer to investigate, but her tone communicated skepticism that I'd hear later in her incident report. I gave her our address, and she confirmed it was in her system, said someone would arrive within 20 minutes. I thanked her and hung up, then realized we had 20 minutes to wait with that thing in our garage, separated from us by only a single door, and our certainty that we'd locked it properly. Linda suggested we wait outside, take the kids to a neighbor's house, but that felt like abandonment somehow. Like leaving would allow whatever was happening to spread unchecked through our home. Instead, we sat in the living room on our couch with perfect sight lines to the garage door, watching it like it might burst open any moment. The kids remained upstairs, their normal evening chaos comforting in its familiarity. Linda held my hand tighter than necessary, her fingernails digging small crescents into my palm. Neither of us spoke, because what could we possibly say? That we'd brought something into our home without meaning to? Something that defied explanation? That our secure life with its alarm systems and neighborhood watch meetings had been violated by forces that shouldn't exist? The police arrived in 18 minutes. I checked my phone's clock obsessively while waiting. 2 officers, both younger than I expected, stepped out of their patrol car with the casual confidence of people who'd seen everything and weren't particularly impressed by another nervous homeowner. The male officer was maybe 30, with close-cropped hair and a name tag reading Foster. The female officer looked even younger, dark hair pulled back tight, her name tag saying Delgado. They approached our door with that practiced awareness of surroundings that probably became automatic after enough years on the job. I met them at the door before they could knock, not wanting the doorbell to alert the kids that police had arrived. Linda stood behind me, and I could feel her presence like support I desperately needed. Officer Foster asked me to explain what happened, his pen already out, ready to document whatever crazy story I was about to tell. I walked them through everything, the present appearing, our inability to identify its source, the security footage showing nothing, finding it moved and changed in the garage. I showed them Linda's earlier photo of the present looking normal, then described what it looked like now. Officer Delgado asked if anyone else had seen these changes besides me and Linda. I had to admit no, just us, which I knew immediately sounded suspicious. 2 people experiencing the same hallucination or delusion, folie à deux, the kind of thing that made police reports and got people referred for psychiatric evaluation. Foster asked if we'd been under unusual stress lately, if there had been any changes in our household, if either of us had a history of mental health issues. Standard questions, I knew, but each one felt like an accusation. We were being evaluated not just for our claims, but for our sanity. I asked them to please just look in the garage, see for themselves what we were describing. Foster exchanged a glance with Delgado that communicated volumes about their expectations. Another false alarm. Another couple who'd worked themselves into panic over nothing. They followed me through the house to the garage door, both of them scanning our living room and kitchen with trained observations, probably checking for signs of drug use or domestic disturbance. Everything appeared perfectly normal, because it was perfectly normal, except for the one thing in our garage that made no sense. I opened the garage door and hit the light switch, fluorescent bulbs flickering to life after their usual half-second delay. The present sat exactly where I'd left it on the high shelf. Forest green wrapping paper, silver ribbon, completely dry, no liquid anywhere, no signs of the transformation Linda and I had both witnessed 90 minutes earlier. I stood there with my mouth open, unable to process what I was seeing. Or rather, what I wasn't seeing. No red-soaked paper, no black ribbon, no pool of viscous liquid spreading across the concrete. Linda pushed past me into the garage, walking straight to the workbench where we'd seen the present sitting. Her hands ran across the surface, searching for dampness, for any evidence that something had been there, completely dry. She checked the floor drain where the liquid had been spreading. Nothing. She looked at me with betrayal in her eyes, like I'd orchestrated this somehow to make her seem crazy. Officer Foster cleared his throat behind us, his professional courtesy wearing thin. He asked if this was the concerning present we'd called about, and I nodded because what else could I say? Officer Delgado walked over and lifted the present from the shelf, shaking it gently near her ear like Linda had done that first morning. She said it felt like maybe some books or picture frames, definitely nothing dangerous or concerning. She offered to open it if we wanted, to put our minds at ease. I almost accepted, then stopped myself. Some instinct screamed that opening it was exactly what we shouldn't do, what whatever force had brought this thing into our home wanted us to do. I said no, we'd handle it ourselves. Thank you for checking. Foster left his business card on our workbench, told us to call again if we had an actual emergency, but his tone made clear he wouldn't be rushing back to our house. They left through the garage door, and I watched their patrol car pull away while Linda stood behind me, her breathing shallow and fast, like she was holding back panic. When I finally turned around, she asked what the hell had just happened. How had the present changed back? Or had it ever changed at all? Were we both losing our minds together? I couldn't answer because I had no answers. We stood in our garage under fluorescent lights, staring at an innocuous-looking present that had somehow made fools of us to the police. Linda said, maybe we should take photos, document everything from now on, create evidence that couldn't disappear. I agreed and pulled out my phone, snapping pictures of the present from multiple angles. The photos looked completely normal, just a wrapped gift sitting on a shelf. Nothing strange, nothing concerning, nothing that would convince anyone we were experiencing something real. We went back inside and locked the garage door, though the lock felt meaningless now. Whatever was happening didn't respect physical barriers. The kids came down for dinner, and we went through the motions of normal family life, setting the table, serving food, asking about their days. Oscar complained that Delilah had cheated at their video game. Delilah insisted she won fair and square. Bethany ate in silence while scrolling through her phone, occasionally showing us memes we didn't understand but laughed at anyway, because that's what parents do. After dinner, after the kids went to bed, Linda and I sat at the kitchen table drinking wine we usually saved for special occasions. She said maybe we should see someone together, couples counseling or something, because this stress was affecting both of us. I knew she was right, but also knew that no therapist could help with whatever was actually happening. We weren't having a mental health crisis. Something was in our garage, something that could change and revert, something that could manipulate physical reality in ways that made documentation impossible. I told her about how the present had felt when I touched it, that sense of wrongness that bypassed logic. She nodded and admitted she'd felt it too, a kind of repulsion that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than normal senses. We discussed throwing it away again, just taking it outside and putting it in someone else's trash, letting it become their problem. But that felt cowardly and dangerous. What if it just came back? What if getting rid of it angered whatever force had brought it here? We'd watched enough horror movies to know that destroying cursed objects usually made things worse. We decided to leave it alone for now, not touch it, not acknowledge it, pretend it wasn't there, and maybe it would simply disappear the way it had appeared. The logic was absurd, but no more absurd than everything else. Linda went to bed around 11:00 p.m., exhausted from emotional stress that left no physical evidence but drained energy just as completely. I told her I'd be up soon, but I knew I'd spend most of the night sitting at the kitchen table watching the garage door. Around 1 a.m., I heard it. Not a loud crash or obvious sound, but something subtle, a wet, tearing noise like fabric being ripped slowly underwater. It came from the garage, muffled by the door between us, but unmistakable. I stood up so fast my chair tipped backward, clattering against the kitchen floor loud enough I was sure it would wake Linda. I waited, frozen, listening. The sound came again, longer this time, accompanied by something that might have been breathing if breathing could sound that deep and resonant. I approached the garage door like it was a wild animal, slow movements, hands visible, heart hammering so hard I could hear blood rushing in my ears. The doorknob felt cold under my palm, colder than it should be, even considering it was winter. I pressed my ear against the door and immediately regretted it. The breathing sound was closer now, just on the other side of this barrier, something massive inhaling and exhaling in rhythms that felt wrong. Too slow, too deep, not quite matching any living thing I could imagine. I backed away and went to check on my family instead. Bethany slept with her phone clutched in one hand, earbuds still in, teenage rebellion even in unconsciousness. The twins were together in Oscar's bed, like they did sometimes when Delilah had nightmares, two small bodies curled together for comfort. Linda was sprawled across our bed, one arm reaching toward my side even in sleep. Everyone was safe. Everyone was fine. Whatever was in the garage hadn't reached them yet. I went back downstairs and made coffee at 1:30 a.m. because sleep was impossible now. I sat at the kitchen table watching the garage door, waiting for it to burst open, waiting for whatever was breathing on the other side to emerge. But nothing happened, just silence, and the normal settling sounds of our house, the furnace kicking on and off, the refrigerator humming, pipes ticking as they expanded and contracted. By 3 a.m., I'd convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing, that stress and lack of sleep were creating auditory hallucinations. Then the lights in the garage turned on by themselves. I could see the glow under the door, bright fluorescent illumination where there should be only darkness. I stood up, coffee mug still in hand, and watched as the light began to pulse. Not flickering like failing bulbs, but pulsing with regular rhythm like a heartbeat. On off, steady and purposeful. I set down my mug and walked to the door, compelled by some force stronger than my fear. My hand reached for the doorknob and twisted before I could stop myself. The garage was empty. No present on the shelf. No present on the workbench. Just our normal storage. Plastic bins of Christmas decorations, tools on pegboards, Linda's car parked in its usual spot. I stepped fully into the garage, turning in a slow circle, searching every corner and shadow. The present was gone, simply vanished like it had never existed. Relief flooded through me so intense I almost laughed. It was over. Whatever this had been, it was finished. Then I saw the wrapping paper in Linda's back seat. Through her car window, illuminated by the overhead lights, I could see green paper and silver ribbon sitting on the back bench seat like a passenger. Not the whole present, just the wrapping, flattened and folded neatly like someone had carefully removed it. I approached her car slowly, each step feeling like walking through wet cement. The driver's door was unlocked even though Linda was religious about locking it. I opened the door and the interior light revealed more details. The wrapping paper wasn't empty. Something was inside the folds, something that shifted slightly as I reached for it. I grabbed it quickly before I could reconsider, pulling it out of the car and unfolding it on the garage floor under full lights. Inside the paper was a single Polaroid photograph, not a modern digital print, but an actual instant photograph with that distinctive white border and square format. The image showed our house from across the street, taken recently based on the Christmas wreath still hanging on our door. But written across the bottom in shaky handwriting were words that stopped my heart. We're already inside. Your children are lovely. I ran back into the house, taking stairs 3 at a time, my coffee-fueled panic giving me speed I didn't know I still had. Bethany's room first. She was still there, still sleeping, phone still in hand. Twins next, still together, still breathing steadily in that peaceful way children do when they feel completely safe. Linda, in our bedroom, undisturbed, her gentle snores confirming she was deeply asleep. Everyone was fine, everyone was safe, but someone had been in Linda's car. Someone had access to our garage without triggering any alarms. Someone had taken a photograph of our house and written a message designed to maximize terror. This wasn't supernatural anymore. This was something worse. This was human predation dressed up to look like something else. I called 911 again, but this time I had evidence. A photograph with a direct threat against my children written in clear handwriting. This time, they'd have to take me seriously. Sergeant Foster arrived 20 minutes later, looking significantly less patient than he had earlier. He took the Polaroid with gloved hands, placed it in an evidence bag, and asked me detailed questions about who had access to our home and vehicles. I explained again about the security system showing no breaches, the doorbell camera capturing nothing, the impossibility of someone entering without leaving evidence. He said impossibility wasn't the same as difficulty, that someone determined enough could bypass most residential security with basic tools and knowledge. He asked about enemies, ex-employees, anyone who might have a grudge. I worked in financial services managing portfolios for moderately wealthy clients. Linda was a high school English teacher. We lived quiet, boring lives. No scandals, no affairs, no dramatic conflicts that would inspire stalking. Foster looked at me like I was naive, like everyone had enemies whether they knew it or not. He took the Polaroid with him and promised to have it analyzed for fingerprints and handwriting, said he'd file a report and increase patrols in our neighborhood. But as he was leaving, he turned back and said something that chilled me worse than anything else that night. He said this kind of systematic psychological harassment, the escalation pattern, the careful staging, he'd seen it before. Usually it preceded something worse. Usually the harassment was preparation, testing responses, breaking down resistance before the actual attack. He recommended we consider staying elsewhere for a few days while they investigated, maybe with relatives or a hotel, somewhere that wasn't compromised. Linda woke up to find me packing bags for all of us at 4:30 a.m., throwing clothes and toiletries into suitcases without careful consideration. She asked what I was doing, and I showed her the Polaroid on my phone. I'd photographed it before Foster took it. She read the message 3 times before the color drained from her face. She asked when I'd found it, and I explained about the wrapping paper appearing in her car, the present vanishing from the garage. She didn't question whether I was telling the truth anymore. The written threat had made everything real in a way nothing else had. We woke the kids at 5 a.m., telling them we were going on a surprise trip, making it sound like adventure rather than flee. Oscar asked if we were going to Disneyland, and I said maybe, knowing we were actually going to my brother's house 3 hours away, where we could regroup and figure out what to do next. Bethany knew something was seriously wrong. She was 14, not stupid, but she didn't argue, just packed her stuff and helped the twins gather their favorite toys. By 5:30 a.m., we were loading Linda's car, all of us moving with the frantic energy of people escaping something we couldn't name. I went back inside one last time to grab my laptop and some work files. The house felt different in the pre-dawn darkness. Familiar rooms made strange by our impending absence. I was in my office when I heard it. That wet, tearing sound again, coming from downstairs, from the garage. The same sound I'd heard at 1 a.m., except louder now, more insistent. I should have run, should have gotten into the car and driven away without looking back. Instead, some compulsion pulled me toward the garage door. The present sat on the floor directly in front of the door, positioned where I'd have to step over it to leave. It had returned, but changed again. The wrapping wasn't red anymore, wasn't green. It was black, absolutely black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The ribbon was white now, tied in that same perfect bow, and the box underneath had grown larger, significantly larger. What had been maybe 6 inches square was now twice that size, big enough to hold something substantial inside. And it was moving. Not subtle shifts this time, but obvious motion, the sides of the box bulging outward, then contracting inward like breathing, like something alive was trapped inside, growing, preparing to emerge. I backed away slowly, not wanting to trigger whatever was about to happen. The wet tearing sound came again, and I saw one corner of the box split open, black wrapping paper peeling back to reveal that organic material underneath. The grayish-green surface pulsed with visible veins, and through the split, I saw something that might have been fingers or tentacles or something else entirely, pushing outward, testing the boundaries of its container. I ran, just turned and sprinted through the house, out the front door, not bothering to lock anything behind me. Linda had the car running, kids buckled in, ready to go the moment I appeared. I jumped into the passenger seat and screamed at her to drive, now immediately. Don't stop for anything. She pulled out of our driveway without questioning, tires squealing slightly on the cold pavement. In the rearview mirror, I could see our house receding, every light now burning bright, looking cheerful and normal from the outside while something impossible happened in the garage. We drove for 30 minutes in complete silence before Oscar asked why we were running away. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't terrify him, so I said we were just being extra careful, that there might be a gas leak at the house and we needed to stay away until professionals checked it. The lie came easily, because protecting my children from the truth seemed more important than honesty. Delilah asked if our house would explode, and I said no, probably not. It was just a precaution. Bethany wasn't buying any of it. She asked what was really happening, using that tone that demanded real answers. I looked at Linda, silently asking permission to tell the truth, or at least a version of it. She nodded slightly, and I tried to explain, without explaining. I said someone had been leaving strange things at our house, that the police were investigating, that we were staying with family until everything was safe. Bethany asked what kind of strange things, and I said I couldn't give details yet, just trust that we were being careful. My brother lived in a small town 3 hours north, far enough to feel like escape, but close enough to reach quickly if needed. He wasn't expecting us, but when I called from the road and explained we had a home emergency, he said to come immediately. They had space. His wife was already making up beds when we arrived at 9 a.m., their 2 kids excited to have surprise cousins for however long we stayed. We unloaded our hastily packed bags and tried to settle into this temporary refuge. Linda called the police station at 10 a.m. to request a welfare check on our house, explaining we'd had to leave suddenly and wanted someone to verify everything was secure. They said they'd send a unit within the hour and call us back. That call came at 11:15 a.m., and what they reported made no sense. The house was completely normal. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of disturbance, no mysterious presence in the garage or anywhere else. They'd walked through every room with our permission, checked windows and doors, found nothing concerning. Everything was locked and secure, exactly as it should be. I asked specifically about the garage, describing the present that had been growing and splitting open. The officer said the garage was empty except for normal storage items and Linda's car, which we'd taken with us. He suggested maybe the stress of recent events had created some confusion, that perhaps we'd been dealing with regular package theft or pranks that got blown out of proportion. His tone was kind but dismissive, treating us like anxious homeowners who'd panicked unnecessarily. He recommended we come home when we felt comfortable, assured us the house was safe, but it wasn't safe. I knew that with certainty that bypassed evidence and logic. Something had been in our home, something that could manipulate reality or perception, that could appear and disappear, leave evidence, then erase it before authorities arrived. The photo with the threat against our children had been real. Foster had taken it as evidence, that one concrete proof that this wasn't all in our heads. Linda called Foster directly and asked about the analysis of the Polaroid. He said forensics would take a few days, but preliminary examination showed no useful fingerprints, and the handwriting was too irregular to match easily. We stayed at my brother's house for 3 days, all of us trying to maintain normalcy while processing trauma that had no satisfying explanation. The kids adapted faster than adults do, turning everything into an adventure, enjoying the break from routine. Linda and I barely slept, jumping at every unfamiliar sound in an unfamiliar house, checking on the children. Multiple times each night, my brother's wife made meals and kept conversation light, not pushing us to explain what had driven us from our home in the middle of the night. On day 4, Foster called with an update. They'd analyzed the Polaroid and found something disturbing. The photograph had been taken from public property across the street from our house, not from our yard or anywhere that required trespassing. The handwriting analysis suggested the writer was deliberately disguising their natural hand, making individual letter identification difficult. But most concerning was the film itself. Polaroid instant film with chemical signatures indicating it had been manufactured in the 1990s, decades old, but somehow kept pristine and functional. He said this level of planning and preparation indicated someone who'd been working toward this for an extended time. The present appearing after Christmas, the escalating psychological pressure, the untraceable photograph, all of it suggested someone who knew our routines intimately, who'd studied our security measures, who wanted to drive us from our home without ever directly threatening violence. Foster asked if we'd been investigating anything, if Linda had any students or former students who might be fixated on her, if my work had brought me into contact with unstable individuals. We racked our brains trying to identify anyone who fit that profile. Linda taught high school English, passionate about literacy and helping struggling students succeed. She'd never failed a student maliciously, never had serious disciplinary issues beyond normal teenage drama. I managed investment portfolios, worked with numbers and spreadsheets, rarely met clients face to face. Our social circles were small and ordinary. Other parents from school, neighbors we'd wave to while mowing lawns, relatives who sent cards at holidays. Foster suggested we hire a private security consultant to audit our home systems, find vulnerabilities someone might have exploited. He also recommended installing additional cameras with cloud backup, replacing standard locks with smart locks that would log every entry, considering a monitored alarm system that would alert police automatically if triggered. The costs would be significant, but he said our peace of mind was worth it. I agreed to everything, willing to spend whatever necessary to feel safe in our own home again. We returned home on day 5, a full week after that present had first appeared. The house looked exactly as we'd left it, normal, suburban, unremarkable. Contractors had already been working for 2 days, installing new security equipment under my brother's supervision since we weren't there. Cameras covered every angle now, recording continuously to cloud servers. Smart locks on every door logged entry attempts. Motion sensors covered the garage, hallways, even individual rooms. If anyone entered our home without authorization, we'd know immediately. The kids ran inside, excited to be back, claiming their rooms and familiar spaces with relief. Linda walked through slowly, touching walls and furniture like she was confirming they were real. I went straight to the garage, empty. The present was gone entirely, leaving no trace it had ever existed. No wrapping paper, no organic box material, no evidence of anything unusual, just our normal storage and Linda's car and the smell of oil and rubber that defined every attached garage in America. That night, with everyone home and the house secured with the best equipment money could buy, I finally slept. Deep, dreamless sleep that left me groggy when I woke at 7 a.m. to Linda shaking my shoulder. She was crying, holding her phone, showing me something I couldn't immediately process. The new doorbell camera, recording continuously, had captured movement at 3:00 a.m. I pulled up the app and watched the footage, my stomach turning to ice. The present sat on our porch at 3:01 a.m., just appeared between one frame and the next. No delivery person visible, no car stopping, no explanation. The footage showed continuous recording with timestamps, no gaps or edits, but the present simply materialized like it had been photoshopped into reality. This time it was wrapped in white paper with red ribbon, larger than before, easily 2 feet on each side. The camera watched it sit motionless for 2 hours before the sun started rising and I'd begun waking. I ran downstairs and threw open the front door. The porch was empty. No present, no evidence anything had been there. I checked the doorbell camera again, scrubbing through the footage in real time. The present was clearly visible in the recordings, sitting on our porch from 3:01 a.m. until 6:47 a.m. Then it vanished between frames, there 1 second, gone the next. I saved the footage immediately, downloading it to 3 separate storage locations before it could mysteriously disappear like other evidence had. Foster arrived within an hour of my call. I showed him the footage on my laptop, pointed out the timestamps, the continuous recording, the impossibility of what we were watching. He sat silently for a long time before admitting this was beyond his expertise. He said he'd forward the footage to specialists, people who dealt with cases that didn't fit normal parameters. He didn't say what kind of specialists or what kind of cases, but his tone suggested he knew more than he was saying. While Foster was there, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, then saw it had a local area code and picked up. A woman's voice, older, professional, asked if I was experiencing unusual phenomena in my home. I asked who she was, and she identified herself as Dr. Valerie Strand from something called the Anomalous Materials Response Division. She said Foster had contacted her division about our case, that she was already on her way to our house, that I should not touch anything unusual or allow my family near any objects that appeared spontaneously. She arrived 30 minutes later in an unmarked van, accompanied by 2 people in plain clothes, who could have been anything from scientists to military contractors. Dr. Strand was maybe 60, gray hair pulled back, wearing practical clothing with dozens of pockets. She shook my hand firmly and asked to review all our evidence. Photos, videos, the Polaroid Foster had analyzed. She examined everything with practiced efficiency, making notes in a tablet, occasionally asking clarifying questions that suggested she'd seen similar situations before. Finally, she looked at Linda and me and said what we'd been dreading to hear. We'd been targeted by something she couldn't fully explain, something her division had been tracking for 15 years across multiple states. The presence appeared randomly or following patterns they hadn't decoded, manifesting in homes that fit certain criteria that remained unclear. Most families who received them opened them within days, unable to resist curiosity or convinced they were normal packages. Those families rarely survived the experience. Dr. Strand explained that whatever was inside the packages, she called them seed pods, appeared to be alive in ways that defied conventional biology. They grew when observed, changed appearance to lure victims into opening them, created psychological pressure through escalating fear. The goal seemed to be getting opened, releasing whatever matured inside. The families who survived were those who, like us, resisted the urge to open them despite increasing pressure to do so. She asked why we hadn't opened it yet, and I explained about being methodical, about checking with family first, about that instinctive wrongness I'd felt from first touch. Dr. Strand nodded and said that hesitation had saved our lives. Most people opened strange presents immediately, especially ones that appeared mysteriously. She said the fact that the pod had escalated to manifesting on our porch meant it was becoming desperate, trying harder to be opened as time passed without success. Her team spent 6 hours examining our house, using equipment I didn't recognize to scan for energy signatures or biological traces or whatever metrics they used. They found residue in the garage where the pod had been, microscopic particles of that organic material that shouldn't exist according to established science. They collected samples, documented everything, treated our home like a crime scene crossed with a medical quarantine. The children watched from upstairs windows, confused and frightened by all the activity. Before leaving, Dr. Strand gave us a card with a direct number and emergency protocols. She said if another pod appeared, we should evacuate immediately and call her division before calling regular police. She explained that local law enforcement wasn't equipped to handle these situations, that standard procedures could actually make things worse. Her team would respond within hours anywhere in the country. She apologized that she couldn't explain more, that much of what they knew remained classified or was simply beyond current human understanding. She also said something that terrified me more than everything else. The fact that we'd resisted opening the first pod might mark us as targets for more aggressive attempts. Whatever intelligence guided these manifestations seemed to learn from failures, adapt tactics. We should remain vigilant, trust our instincts, never convince ourselves that strange appearances were normal packages or deliveries. She'd seen families receive multiple pods over years, each iteration more sophisticated than the last. After they left, we sat at the kitchen table as a family and had the conversation we should have had from the beginning. We told the kids, in age-appropriate language, that sometimes things appear that aren't what they seem, that if they ever saw a present or package that none of us had brought into the house, they should tell an adult immediately without touching it. Oscar asked if it was like stranger danger, and I said yes, exactly like that, but for objects instead of people. Bethany asked what was really inside the presents, and I said we didn't know, only that they were dangerous. For 3 months, nothing happened. Life returned to something approaching normal. We kept the enhanced security system, checked cameras obsessively, jumped at unexpected doorbells, but no more pods appeared, no more photographs with threats, no more manifestations of impossible objects. Dr. Strand called weekly to check in, each time confirming that our case remained active but dormant. She said this pattern was common, periods of intense activity followed by months or years of nothing. Then one morning in April, I woke to find Bethany sitting at the kitchen table staring at a small box wrapped in blue paper with yellow ribbon. She said she'd found it on her bed when she woke up, that it hadn't been there when she fell asleep. The box was maybe 4 inches on each side, small enough to seem innocent, positioned on her pillow like a gift from the tooth fairy. She hadn't touched it, had left it there and come downstairs to get me, remembering our family talk about mysterious packages. I called Dr. Strand while keeping everyone away from Bethany's room. She said to evacuate immediately, that manifestation inside the house represented escalation beyond anything they'd previously documented. Her team arrived within 90 minutes. They'd apparently stationed themselves within response range after our first encounter. They removed the pod using containment equipment that looked like something from a science fiction film, treating it with a level of caution that confirmed how dangerous these things were. Dr. Strand explained that this pod had been different, smaller, and more targeted. Instead of trying to attract general curiosity, it had manifested directly on Bethany's pillow, positioned where she'd find it immediately upon waking. The psychological impact of finding it in her private space, in her bed, would have been intense. Most teenagers would have opened it without thinking, assuming it was a gift from parents or friends. Only our previous experience and family conversation had prevented tragedy. She recommended we relocate permanently, that our home had been marked in whatever way these phenomena tracked targets. The manifestations would continue, probably escalate further until something opened a pod or the family moved beyond whatever geographical or psychological boundary contained these occurrences. Leaving meant abandoning our home, our neighborhood, the life we'd built. But staying meant living under siege from forces we couldn't understand or fight with conventional methods. We moved 3 weeks later. Sold the house at a loss to buyers we warned about strange occurrences, though they didn't believe us and assumed we were just strange people. We relocated to a different state, different climate, different everything. Dr. Strand helped arrange the move through resources her division accessed, making it happen faster than should have been possible. She said distance might help, that changing too many variables at once sometimes confused the tracking mechanism. We've been in our new home for 18 months now. No pods have appeared. We still check cameras constantly, still jump at unexpected packages, still have family conversations about mysterious objects. Bethany struggles with anxiety about her bedroom, checking under her pillow multiple times before sleeping. The twins have nightmares sometimes about presents that chase them. Linda and I barely sleep, taking turns staying up to monitor security feeds. Dr. Strand calls monthly, tracking our case among hundreds of others across the country. She says manifestations are increasing in frequency, that more families encounter these things every year. Her division is struggling to respond to all reports, working with limited resources to fight something most people don't believe exists. She's asked if I'd be willing to help identify pods in public spaces, train my eye to spot the telltale signs that mark them as different from normal packages. I agreed, because I can't live knowing I might pass another family's pod and do nothing. She taught me what to look for, wrapping that's too perfect, ribbons tied in patterns that don't quite match human technique, packages that appear with no delivery tracking or logical source. I've found 3 pods in 18 months. Each time, I called Dr. Strand's emergency line and stayed near the pod until her team arrived to secure it. Each time, I wondered whose life I'd saved by noticing something most people would walk past without concern. If you find an unopened present under your tree after Christmas, call the police. But more specifically, call this number. I can't share it publicly, but Dr. Strand's division operates a hotline for exactly these situations. Don't touch the present. Don't try to open it. Don't convince yourself it's probably nothing. Get everyone out of your house and wait for professionals who understand what they're dealing with. You might feel ridiculous calling about a mysterious gift. You might worry about wasting government resources on what's probably just a neighbor's mistake. Call anyway, because these things are real, and they're spreading, and most families who encounter them die before learning what they were facing. I survived through paranoia and hesitation, through trusting instincts that said something was wrong even when evidence suggested otherwise. Now I'm telling you what I learned, hoping it reaches someone before they make the fatal mistake of curiosity. Be paranoid. Be careful. Check every package. Question every unexpected gift. Your life and your family's lives might depend on recognizing danger when it's wrapped in festive paper with a perfect bow. The presents are coming. I just hope you'll be ready when one comes for you. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.